Imagine a world without choices. Imagine you can't make your own decision. That wouldn't be a world for me. That wouldn't be a world for you. UIC.
Tell them we're gonna be stronger. Together, together we can make it right. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. Gonna be stronger together. Time we all just unify. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. It is a natural right for every human being to be free. Free, so free. So the government is there to protect you and me. UIC objective is to liberate the citizens from colonial bondage, them regulation, them taxation. Rob Jamaica, we independent. Be stronger together, together we can make it right. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. We're gonna be stronger together. Come, we all just unify. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I.
Good evening, Uniters, and welcome to another UIC Live. I'm your host, Winston, Wright, Party Chairman, and I'm here to share with you again another live. Welcome. So again, we have our call-in program, which you will be able to reach us on 491-4995. So call in and share with us and this very important topic, the topic of national security, whether you're being protected or you're being locked down. So we find ourselves in a situation where we're being told that restrictive and draconian laws are being used to protect us from ourselves and each other. But is it really so? So national security is a very near and dear topic for the UIC, and it's a very near and dear topic for me, and I have the privilege of being the spokesperson for the movement on national security. So I'd love to have that interactive feedback with you so we can discuss the UIC ideas. Now, here's something that's key. National security is a very testy issue, particularly with the long-term feelings of the government in that regard. And of course, they're anxious to grab anybody's idea and run with that. So we have to make sure that we keep our ideas not fully fleshed out, but just synopsis, just an inkling of what we plan to do instead of laying the plan all out there. We have had the privilege of working with some very serious members of the security establishment, both locally and internationally, and members of the Jamaican diaspora who are in law enforcement have shared with us on ways, best practices that can help us bring the crime problem under control. Now, we're not focused on a one-dimensional plan where we send police and military out to quash young people and anyone we see as being divergent in the hopes of catching the bad guys, but a full-pronged social development program, youth intervention program, and of course, policing intervention. And we're not gonna go to the kind of policing that we see. We're gonna have the potential for that because in any serious situation where lives are in danger, where you need to protect the citizenry from force, you need to have the potential to apply force. But it won't be blind force turned loose on the Jamaican populace. So we want to talk to you about all of that. Now, I don't know how many of us are aware of the policing situation in Jamaica. The Jamaica Constabulary Force currently boasts that it's about 130 something years old. Please remember that independent Jamaica is just 60 years old, or supposedly independent Jamaica is just 60 years old. So twice as old as independent Jamaica. So what do you suppose those constabulary officers were doing 60 plus years ago? What do you think they were doing? at a time when our foreparents were enslaved and were being taken advantage of in the most violent, brutal ways. What do you think those officers were doing? Were they arresting those persons who are using fraud and force against our ancestors? Force to keep them in bondage and servitude, fraud to deny them what is rightfully theirs and their human dignity, their God given rights. So, one of the things we have to remember is that any change in our justice situation, justice, not policing, not legal, justice situation, has to begin with the ability to firstly apply the principles of natural justice to everyone. So everyone should be protected equally. And of course, the enforcement arm and the investigative arm of that needs to be beyond reproach, meaning it should be from a tainted background where your history that you revel in is steep or intertwined deeply with the oppressive regime that we call slavery. And of course, when we look back into the recent past of the service, we'll see atrocities like the Coral Garden incursion. We'll see atrocities like the eviction in Pinnacle, and we'll see other things like the recent Tivoli Garden incursion. We'll see like the crime management actions in those areas. Now, we're not here to debate guilt or innocence. There's a prescribed means by which the state determines that. And anyone who allows, accepts a deviation from that sets a very dangerous precedent, because now you have a system that does not allow for the interrogation of facts and the determination of partiality, bias, and most importantly, innocence through a combative means. And by combative, I don't mean physically combative, but verbally. So let's talk about national security and what it does for us and what we have now as national security. Now, the UIC has had several utterances on national security. We have talked about it, we have made releases about it. As a matter of fact, the UIC recently published a press release that I'm hoping you all had a chance to look at, because the social media carries our stuff, our releases, our opinions, our point of view, because we create those accounts. But mainstream media don't readily hearken to our account because it is different. And what I'm going to share with you right now is a snippet of that release that was sent this morning, so you can have that in your mind and be able to digest that. So let's talk about that release. All right? That release was put out by us, and I'm trying to get that here on the screen so I can share that with you. But if not, I'll just read. All right. It starts. Since the start of the year, United Independence Congress has been monitoring a series of fatal encounters between citizens and JCF officers. The circumstances of these shootings conflict with the narrative of the JCF. We are currently aware of the reported mistaken shooting of 2 unarmed security guards in Negril whilst on duty, and the fatal wounding of a 64-year-old farmer in St. James, with a firearm being reportedly recovered. There is also an evolving situation in Hanover, where a reportedly intoxicated young man was killed after allegedly shooting a police officer. However, no firearm was recovered. The UIC is demanding that the Commissioner of Police, Major General Anthony Anderson, address the nation on these questionable fatal shootings. It is important that the nation be appraised of any investigation into these incidents and if there is no investigation, detail why that is so. The silence of the commissioner and the JCF top brass will be interpreted by the affected families as the police protecting the force's image at the cost of poor people's lives. The UIC is also counseling the JCF to adopt the following measures. 1. Publicize the JCF's use of force policy to ensure that citizens have a fair expectation of the level of policing to expect. 2. Systematically audit members' performance in the area of use of force and de-escalation techniques. 3. Create an officer-involved shooting review team in each division to dissect each lethal encounter with a view to improve policing and deter bad actors. The UIC maintains that self-defense is the only justifiable use of force by agents of the state or any individual. The application of the ultimate sanction, death, should never be accepted as a routine of the state. The present government has a noticeable penchant for promoting state violence, such as the National Security Minister's horrific charge to police for them to be more lethal. The UIC subscribes to proven policing best practices such as community policing, restorative justice, and independent civilian oversight of police. So, there you have it. Tell me, did the UIC say anything wrong or disagreeable? If you disagree as a supporter and a member, feel free to reach out right now, 491-4995, and let's discuss it. Let's particularly discuss the 3 points that we brought out in our press release. Let's hear what you think about it. Looking forward to hearing from you. The phone is right next to me. Looking forward to your call to tell me what you think about the UIC's position on this matter. Now, the commissioner had a press conference yesterday, and there was little or no attention paid to this matter. As a matter of fact, the press that was there didn't even seem to care to have questions, while the commissioner declared that crime was on the decline, serious crimes were on the decline, and he gave statistical percentages. Now, you and I know that there are 3 kinds of lies. There are lies, D-lies, and statistics. Now, I have not looked at the recent JCF blotters to see what those figures are, but you can make a decline of 1 look like 10% or double-digit percentage decline based on the overall figure. So, the loss of life that Jamaicans have faced at the hands of criminals and even state actors demands that we take a more open, a more honest approach to policing. And that is what the UIC is willing and able to do for you. We will improve, firstly, the administrative functions of the JCF. As a matter of fact, under UIC government, there won't be a Jamaica Constabulary Force. What you will have is a Jamaica Police Service, just as their motto, to serve and to reassure. So we will make sure that there is a service to serve you. No locked doors at midnight while you wait for police service. No reports of not having vehicles while you wait for police service. So reach out and let's have that discussion. I remember supporters on the live saying that last night, saying that they would be willing to speak up today. So I'm hoping those members, those supporters, are able to find the time to call in. So let's have that discussion. And bear in mind that your chats are not coming through today. So you really have to call me for me to be able to see and hear what you're saying. So let's have that discussion and clear the air on policing. But back to the commissioner's press conference today, the commissioner spoke about several things, but didn't really speak about anything. There was nothing new and revolutionary in what the JCF does. They gave you a vague statement about having intelligence and you will act to detect crime and arrest perpetrators, which is standard. But he didn't give us statistics as to how many perpetrators were caught for the various crimes committed and how many faced the court successfully for the crimes that they have alleged to have committed. But he gave his assurance that they're out there detecting crime. So the long and short of it is that we don't know the closure rate of the JCF. We don't know the case rate of the JCF. So we don't know what their performance is like. We just know we have police officers on the streets. We would like to know how successful they are at what they do. And that would inform us as the public as to what kind of policing we're having, what kind of policing is being done on our streets and in our neighborhoods. And most importantly, will guide the JCF in determining how officers are treated and most observedly, how officers are even promoted based on how they perform. So, without these statistics, saying that we will detect and deter is a useless point. So let's be frank about that. How do we know that out of the several hundred murders committed so far, that we have a successful closure rate? I remember the JCF has been criticized widely in the past, including internationally by groups such as Amnesty International, for what people like to refer to as assigning crimes to individuals after they have met their demise during encounters with the police. Some under questionable circumstances, like those mentioned in the press release. So let's be clear on that. We have not created an environment to solve crime. We have created an environment that breeds crime, that exports crime, by a constant use of extraordinary powers of the state without any end goal in sight or without any clear articulation of the way forward or what they want to achieve other than keep poor people in a them place, just like they used to do 130 years ago. So now that we know what is happening, the JCF, and I level this criticism at the commissioner constantly, and when I tweet or email or respond to any of his messages, I say to the honorable commissioner that he's a failure. He should resign his office in public disgrace for having politicized his office openly and clearly, and for failing to lead those noble and honorable, hardworking police officers who are out there in the right direction. They have militarized the force because they want bigger guns to fight the big guns of the criminal, but they're not investing in the justice system to when those criminals are apprehended, their cases can be disposed of in a fair, clear, and transparent way with justice seeming to be served and is served. They are not investing in detection and technology for deterrence, but rather investment in prison for incarceration. Does that sound like a government that serves you, that serves your interest, where they plan to lock your men, your boys in a cage without any chance of rehabilitation? Now, I remember when there was a recent uproar about heavy policing in economically depressed communities. The then Andrew Holness government responded by creating an agency and naming a head of that agency and presented an estimate for a budget in the millions to staff that office to provide social interventions in these communities. Other than the press release, I have not heard anything else about this agency. As a matter of fact, it was just another bad idea. But at least it showed that they were willing to think. But on the back end of it, they weren't willing to go any further than the lip service that they have always provided. The UIC has looked at, for example, Singapore, where crime is literally non-existent, where justice is strong and people face swift justice, where justice is always seen to be served, and said, you know, they have a strong program that engages youth and keep them out of the way of idleness, out of the ways of the gangs and other bad influences. They chopper them on the road. And they do that by engaging the youth in the military. UIC National Security Program will always involve the military. The first thing we want to do with our dear members of the JCF is take them off the street corners where they are exposed to the population in a hostile way for political gains. Our soldiers are the tip of a very pointed spear, a spear that is designed to deter our enemies, would-be invaders, and pierce them if needs be. Our citizens aren't that target. So why is our military being turned inward on our people? Why are they placed on the street to provide, quote unquote, fire support, which is a military term and a military exercise for the police? It is not necessary. And here is why. Our police are so trained and able to. As a matter of fact, I don't remember the policing ratio right now, but the last time I compared Jamaica's policing ratio to what the UN posited as the appropriate ratio for a country our size, we were almost twice over that ratio. Now, I have not reviewed that recently, so I'll take a disclaimer on that. But know that our police officers are very capable of policing Jamaica. And what we will do, we will make our military strong, but they will focus on border defense. Jamaica has a very porous border, and we have a Coast Guard that is not the most readily equipped. We will bolster that rank because the Coast Guard and our military working in concert will secure our very porous watery borders to make sure that the illicit items that come in no longer get to our shore, such as guns and drugs, and those items produced on island that are in contravention of any laws remain on island, where our police officers, hardworking police officers, will detect and capture. So we'll take the military off the streets and have them working. Now, our military corps of engineers will form a very important role in building and maintaining our public infrastructure. We will use that as a training ground for our youths, for them to learn skills of a tangible nature by diverting them from the gang. So youth who don't go from high school or even primary school to another tertiary institution or a skills program will go there as a compulsory service to learn discipline, not the art of war as they're being taught now. Because UIC has revelations in the past of that happening. But not the art of war, but rather the art of survival and building. So they will learn that instead of what they're being taught now, whether on the street or in these institutions that they have created when they took UIC ideas 3 years ago. Now, with our youths engaged at that level and our military focused on defending our borders, we will then look at our justice system and we will make sure that there are adequate courtrooms to hear cases, that there are adequate judges that they have the tools to have both virtual and physical courtroom exercises, that witnesses are adequately protected, there are safe houses, that jurors are available and are not subjected to the embarrassment of participating in a jury trial and not being provided with proper sustenance or being properly stipend and shying away from the process. We will have a fuller, better registry of citizens that we can call on to provide these services to make sure that these cases are properly and adequately disposed of and in a timely manner to ensure that justice is not delayed or denied. We will also ensure that we are intervening at the community level with petty session courts that are geared towards settling those interpersonal, those community issues that are now spiraling out of control, because when we call for assistance from the police, they don't have a vehicle that is properly equipped to get them to the scene, and they too are in some cases not properly equipped to de-escalate whatever is happening and then refer that to a lay magistrate who, under the supervision of a resident magistrate, will dispose of these small matters. So we will act in that way to clear the massive backlog of cases that has cluttered our courts and allow the rich and powerful who can steamroll the system with their money to get away, and poor young men who are innocent to be locked away at the government's pleasure for 2 years or even more in some instances. So we will level the playing field and make sure that the law protects everyone equally. And it's a simple and straightforward plan that isn't pie in the sky. Just know-how and a concise plan to get us where we need to be. So with our justice system working, we now turn our attention to how we treat our citizens that run afoul of our laws. We will firstly make sure that the correction services takes up its proper role and have custody and take charge and care of our citizens in state incarceration. With that, they'll be responsible for transport of these incarcerated individuals. They'll be custodians who protect them on their journey between the various institutions, whether lockup, prison, and court, or the many work release programs that we will have where they'll get a chance to pay back society by working on public infrastructure, learning skills, and earning. So when they exit the institution, they are rehabilitated, have the potential to earn, and have earned while they are incarcerated and have funds to transition into a citizen that is participative in the functions of our society. When we do that, we will now turn our attention. And while I'm saying this, it doesn't mean that these will happen in silos, individual or separate from each other. But in most cases, simultaneously, these things will be happening. So when that is done, we will now turn our attention to crime detection and policing. One of the strong tools that we will use is community policing. And this is a very powerful tool because it puts your police officer in your community as a member of the community, as a participant in the life of the community, where his kids go to school with yours, where he knows you and you go to the same church and play on the same football team and have the same domino competition. Your police officer will be an agent of social change, not a force, but an agent of social change. And in doing so, will bring that human element to the interaction. I'm not saying that it will be perfect, but I'm saying it will be better than what we have, where you have officers with no allegiance to communities who brutalize citizens and do many things that are outside of their oath and claim that they are policing the neighborhood. So we will have more involved policing with a community policing program, with police being in the community, along with the lay magistrates working on de-escalation, working to have the community recognize them as a part of and not an oppressor or an occupying force. From there, we will make sure that technology is available at all spheres of the investigative process to drive investigations, to participate in chain of custody to make sure that evidence are properly handled. For example, there's recent talks of an autopsy suite being built, one autopsy suite with one pathologist for the hundreds and thousands of murders that we have in Jamaica, are deaths under questionable circumstances that need scientific investigation. A UIC government would invest heavily in this program, and here it is, simple and straightforward. 3 major autopsy suite, one in each county. We have a university, and we have always said, and our spokesperson on education will talk about this, that our universities need to transition from being institutions of theory to being institutions of practical. So we have a medical school here on the island, and we have persons who are studying to be internalists, who are studying to be medical surgeons. Those persons, the top of their class, final year students, dozens of them would be available for internship under the guidance of qualified and certified pathologists to carry out these many autopsies that lag behind and drains poor people's pockets because they have to pay to house their deceased loved ones. So we would have these autopsy suites available with these final year students, proper chain of custody, proper medical guidance to investigate and interrogate on a scientific basis cause of death, implements of death, and all the scientific work that is need to link or create that link to show guilt or innocence. Yes, we would do all of that. And we have the resource. Just all we need is the will to do it and a plan to do it. And the UIC has that plan. From there, we can transition now to areas more specific, such as ballistics. There are very powerful ballistic tools that we can embrace outside of the usual microscope and meteorology that is used to determine certain things about a firearm or a spent shell, or even what is referred to as the slug. We will transition beyond that to very detailed analysis, chemical analysis, half-life analysis, and other scientific theories. We will also work on principles such as search technique and employ technology in that area that will allow us to unearth, literally in some cases, things that criminal elements have hidden away to be used in criminal activity. We'll also invest in technology that will allow us to respond quicker to scenes of crime, where we're detecting crimes when they happen and using the same technology to channel resources, police resources, to those areas. Imagine if we have a smart control center that allows us to accept a report of a crime in a particular location, chart the best response route for an officer, and direct officers to that scene, and based on the nature of the crime, work to either intercept someone leaving the scene or get to the scene to render assistance as a first responder. We would also be freeing up dozens of qualified officers that we have sitting in administrative roles and denying the country the use of those skills. We would use civilians in many more roles, qualify them, employ them, not as officers, but as civilian aides in different capacity in different places, and have those officers who holds a desk but are so qualified to secure our streets to be out there doing that in a tangible way. We would now be able to seriously track, account for, count what is happening with crime, and of course, look at how we're training our officers. One of the things our Jamaican police lack is one, the means of defending himself without his firearm. I can remember several years ago, the state of, and let me not call the state, but a state in the US had that very terrible reputation for use of force, lethal force. And one well-thinking member of the political directorate engaged a commissioner who see it as his goal to change that perception. And even though he met resistance from the cohorts of officers that he has, he went about of implementing a plan to firstly disarm the officers, and I don't mean disarm them and send them on the street, but remove their reliance on their firearm and give them multiple means of defending themselves, both lethal and non-lethal. And they were able to transition to a better police force, a better police service, serving their community based on those reports. The UIC would want to do that to allow officers to have the confidence to interact with individuals in the street, because we have seen many a times where poor handling of a police-citizen interaction led to a citizen being fatally wounded, when that could have been avoided if de-escalation skills were sharpened and if non-lethal skills were available. So the UIC, again, is not focused on one facet of change in Jamaica. And as it pertains to national security, we're not focused on one dimension in tackling crime. We're not afraid. We're not tainted by crime. We remember in the 70s, and even though I was just brought into this world, not just brought into this world, and my views were limited, I've read widely on the topic where members of the political establishment then armed the citizenry, created an armed militia, which at that time was a crime and is still a crime. I stand to be corrected. And turned them loose on the streets to create mayhem, to maim, murder, to kill. And that act, those acts have stained us to this day, us as a people, because we have accepted and forgiven them for it and have not sought to have them brought to justice for this criminality, because yes, it is a criminal act. Just as a gunman would have taken up a gun and turned it on a businessman or someone else, the politician who armed someone and turned them on a fellow citizen also commits a crime. It's aiding and abetting, it's conspiracy, and several other things. And we have forgotten and forgiven them for that. And we should not have. They should have been brought to justice. Now, they have been implicated for so long in the wrongdoings that goes on in this country by our international partners, by our fellow countrymen and other powers that be, that they don't have credibility. And when I hear them scream that accusations leveled against them that are unproven damage their reputation was damaged a long time ago. When we look at the various farce trials that they have allowed to take place, sham trials, because it served their political interest to have a particular person exonerated, because of what our president keeps pointing out, that very close link between the branches of government, which needs to be broken and will only be broken under the system of government that Mr. Joseph L. Patterson has proposed, a non-partisan constitutional republic, one that protects the rights of every individual equally, No one is more equal than the other. So when you have state actors who discharge their weapons carelessly, kill a hardworking family man, professional, and then the Minister of National Security issues an indemnity certificate to say you will not face consequences for these actions, you must know that something is wrong. And my fellow Jamaicans, these are the things that we need to decry. I have a call. Let me accept this call. Good evening, caller. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. Who am I speaking with?
Yes, man. My name is Lenford. I'm from Jamaica, but I live in Wisconsin.
Welcome to the program, Lenford. How can I?
I'm watching you as I speak. I have a
Thank you.
question for you. See, Mr. Yes, man. I have a question for you.
I'm listening, Lenford. Go ahead.
No, my understanding is that yes, my understanding is that the rest of the world is trying to change away from the US dollars.
That is correct, and it's not just now. It's been a long time. But what is your question? What is your complete question, Lenford? Is that your only question?
Yes. No, the Jamaica, we're indebted to China somehow. No, when all these dollars change hand with China, no more value of the US dollars. What are we gonna pay China the rest of the debt that Jamaica hold to China? What are we gonna pay them in? It's obvious that they're not gonna accept our money in China. Jamaica money values nothing in China. So how are we gonna accumulate the dollars that China is using to pay them?
All right, thank you for that question, Lenford. All right, so I'm going to ask you to hang up and listen online for the reply.
I will, man. Have a good evening, man. I'm watching you as I speak.
Thank you, Lenford. I appreciate your question. All right, so that was Lenford from Wisconsin. And while his question is away from national security, I'm going to ask your indulgence to stop and speak to Lenford's question briefly. Now, the money doctor is the absolute best person for this question, but let me share with you, Lenford. Yes, the world has been moving away from the US dollar for a long time. And in some circles, you'll hear it being referred to as the petrodollar. And let me firstly tell you how this works. The global oppressive system that has kept Jamaica and other countries of quote-unquote developing status down is the fact that our sovereign debt is nominated in a different currency, mainly the US dollar. Now, we don't make US dollars, we earn US dollars. So to pay back that debt, and sometimes it's a high interest debt, we have to earn that money. But in earning that money, how much are we producing? And we all know that Jamaica doesn't produce a lot, at least not enough to clear our national debt. So we have to continue borrowing, beg grants even, and pray for someone to write off some of our debts, and be bullied by these multinational banks and institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank into abandoning our educational program, in abandoning medical care for our citizens, and give up other social programs to maintain the debt to GDP ratio that they want and the level of debt servicing that they demand. Now that you know the history of our debt, our vicious cyclical debt, let's talk about China. Yes, the Jamaican government has borrowed heavily from the Chinese government. And from my readings, our debt to China is nominated in both US and Chinese currency. Yes, US and Chinese currency. So if, as you have purported, Linford, the US dollar stops becoming the international preferred currency for trade, there's another currency waiting to take its place. And the Chinese currency, the yuan, is one of those currency. As a matter of fact, there is a move afoot to nominate the yuan as the world reserve currency in place of the US. This initiative is being spearheaded by a group referred to as BRICS, BRICS, which would be Brazil, Russia, India, China, and I can't remember the S country, who that is. As a matter of fact, recently, South Africa, S is for South Africa, yes. Recently, South Africa invited our Prime Minister to a BRICS summit. And the reports out of that summit is that we were invited to join the BRICS nation. Now, the BRICS nation is just simply a group of countries who have decided to come together and create an alternative trading bloc to that the US commands, which would be the US, Canada, England, France, Germany, those countries, the G7 countries. So they have created that alternative. They have also gone further. Russia and China have gone further as to back their dollars spending power, their currency, by gold, which means their money is equivalent to gold and therefore has a higher appeal than the US dollar, which is backed by nothing. So there is the dilemma for some, and there is the outlay for others. If the US currency stops being the reserve preferred currency for trading, another currency will take its place, and the debt that we owe to China is already nominated in their currency, and their currency is tipped to become that replacement currency. So we will now have to survive by finding creative ways to earn yuan to pay our debt to China. I hope that helped, Linford. Now, back to national security. And that deviation put me off. I need to remember where I was. But we were talking about behavior of government and government being tainted and their acts against the people. Now, can anybody remember the investigation into the Crawl situation, where that led, what came out of that report? A lot of people didn't hear what came out of that report. And while the verdict stands for itself, the report also paints a very, very sorry picture. I won't go into that into more details. I'll leave that for another time. But we continue to talk about law enforcement, policing, justice in Jamaica. So I've already told you that we'll create a police service. I spoke about our focus on community policing, how we would do to bring focus to community policing, how we would widen the use of technology in control rooms, smart control rooms, to coordinate responses at different levels, how we would use that technology for detection, crime detection, and how we would use technology to ensure that our citizens are safe. Without giving too much, let me ask, for those persons who live in communities that are prone to gun violence, and Jamaica doesn't produce firearms, but we know they get here through our porous borders. That is why the UIC would bring an emphasis on border protection. So we know that those weapons get here through our porous borders. When they get on the street, they're difficult to detect and recover. The last gun amnesty was touted as a success, but yet we still have massive amount of gun crimes. and firearms keep getting recovered daily. Do you know that there's technology out there that will isolate and detect the sound of a bullet being fired? Yes. If bad man run a corner, if that the corner boy stand up on in corner and fire and gun, there is technology that will detect that. And I'll stop there. Because again, I don't want to put any more of the UIC plans out there. Because 3 years ago, and continually, but specifically 3 years ago, we were faced with a situation. You know, let me not get into that. So yes, technology. And this technology will allow us to put more boots on the ground, as I've said before. We would have more officers out in the streets, officers walking the beats, officers able to work, to detect crime, to apprehend, control, and arrest suspects because of wide-scale investment in technology. And you've always heard me touting technology. You've always heard the president talk about the use of technology. And technology is not necessarily bad. It's what the technology is used for that makes it bad. And with well-thinking, well-meaning persons at the helm, technology will work for the benefit of all Jamaicans to make sure that our talk about your safety is not rhetoric, is not political speech, but a pledge. I talked about how we will refocus the JDF on border protection and to be part of our youth intervention strategy that others have tried to borrow liberally for. I've brought focus on the correction service, another part of our law enforcement system that has always been overlooked. The men and women who keep our citizens in custody safe, who are custodians of their safety, their health, their well-being, and the UIC will broaden their role. So let's say, for example, 100-man station. You don't have no police where they're on cell guard duty. No police down going to drive up and down a transport prisoner to and from 4 and 5 different court and different parish, and a transfer prisoner from parish to parish. All of that are the duty of the correction facility. So our corrections officers will be brought into their true role where they will be given their full responsibility for those citizens, again, in our custody, in the custody of the state, for keep and care. So again, another strategy to put more boots on the ground and bring focus on solving crime in a tangible way. Now, we're coming towards the close of the program, and I think it's important that we talk about those 3 recommendations that were made to the constabulary force, that they might take shame face and not listen. But let me tell you, the first one was to publicize the use of force policy to ensure citizens have a fair expectation of the level of policing to expect. And that is simply this. If you encounter a police officer and you conduct yourself in a particular way, meaning the officer approaches you and acts professionally, treats you with respect as a citizen of this country, and you do likewise, the encounter is brief, and even if, say, it's a traffic stop and you get a ticket and you disagree, you'll disagree openly, but there won't be any animosity, but rather the intention to go through the system to clarify what is happening to you. If you encounter an officer and he's behaving professionally, and you act in a manner that pose or suggests that you pose a threat to that officer's safety, then you should know what to expect, that the officer will use physical force to restrain and detain you, and he's doing that with the blessing of the country until he's able to determine whether or not he needs to interact with you any further. Meaning, if he find a reason to lock you up. And on the other hand, if you come in contact with an officer and you pose a threat in any way by virtue of brandishing a weapon or suggesting that you have a weapon that you will use to inflict bodily harm, that officer is so empowered to act to defend himself. And he's taught to choose between lethal and non-lethal force and be able to discriminate in an effective way so as to make sure you as the citizen walk away from that encounter with as little of physical discomfort as possible. And I can go on and on. But imagine if such a narrative, such a documentation, a guide existed. We have all seen the video of the gentleman who was well read on his rights, who was stopped by a police officer, and he went on to document by video the encounter. We also saw where action is being contemplated against an officer who physically attacked someone who is in a public space, making a record of that interaction with that officer, where there is no expectation of privacy for that officer. But because he's a police, he can be brutal and brutish, wrong and strong. If that document exists as a guide for both officers and citizens, those encounters could have gone differently. And I stand by that. We talk in the press release also about systematically auditing, looking at members of the force and their performance on the street when they encounter citizens, how they de-escalate a situation instead of escalating it to the point where it becomes physically, if not lethally violent. To see if these members have the skills, if they have taken onto themselves the learning from police academy, taken it to the street and are able to use it effectively to protect the welfare of a citizen. If you're measuring that performance, you would know who the weak links are, the bad apples are, or where the weakness is in your system of training. We're not seeing that or hearing of that. We also talk, point 3, about creating an officer-involved shooting review team in each division, each police division, to dissect lethal encounters. Now, let's go back to Negril, where those 2 security guards who were on duty was fatally shot. I'm not pronouncing guilt or innocence, or even ascribing negligence to the officers involved, or making any statements against the security officers, one that was seriously injured and another that died. What I'm saying is this: if there was a team consisting of a behavioral expert, a firearms or ballistic expert, an expert in policing techniques, and the entire circumstances of that encounter was reviewed, I am sure they would find weaknesses in that can be addressed in a real way and bring learning and improve policing to the lives of our citizens. We would be able to look at what can be done differently, both by the civilian and by the police. And that, my friends, means improved policing. That, my friends, meant someone would go home alive. But here we are in a situation where there has been an upkick in violence, especially towards officers. And these officers are human and have families that they would like to go home to. They felt threatened, I'm presuming. I would hate to think that they would do something callous and careless and reacted outside of their trading. So was the trading enough to steal them in this circumstance where they panicked unemployed lethal force. All of that would have come to light. And that is why the UIC makes these recommendations, not lightly, but for the protection of citizens firstly, and secondly, the improvement of policing in our Jamaica land we love. So, you have a choice to make. Do you support the callous disregard that harkens to 130 odd years of colonial style policing, or you look for change where change exists? Vote UIC. One Jamaica. Stronger together. Good night, Uniters. God bless.